Chapter 7 Lanya 28 Kuna 572 AF. It's not fair. Krissa opened her eyes and glanced up at me. The others had all gone to bed, exhausted by the fury of another of Father's outbursts, and so we were alone in the great room. She had stripped to the waist, lying on the floor before the fireplace so I could press compresses of sharp-smelling vinegar to her back. What's not fair? This. I jerked my head toward the marks, a rainbow of colors between vicious purple and fading yellow. All of this. You should let me help. Her gaze grew intent upon my face. You do help. I snorted, though I kept my hands gentle. Useless lullabies and bits of medicine from Janice's books. I do little better than nothing. I want to do more. Her eyes hardened into emeralds, her jaw jutting forward. No. I swallowed, struggling not to cower. You can't protect me forever. Perhaps not, she conceded, and shrugged before closing her eyes again. But as long as I'm alive, I can try. I bit my lip, holding back what I wanted to say, afraid to tell her that being behind closed doors did not protect me from her pain, or Brannon's. Echoes of the blows they took resounded in my bones as if I were the one receiving them. I could feel the agony pulsing beneath their skin, the ache of it battering against my thoughts. We suffered the same. They could not shield me from their anguish. My breath caught as I traced the ugly bruises on my sister's forearm, marks left from fingers that had grabbed her too tightly. Though her face remained serene, I could feel the pain even my light touch caused her, and my vision blurred with tears. She endured so much, and I could do nothing to save her. It's all right, dear heart, she murmured, her lips curving as she reassured me. I've had worse. The truth of her words clawed at me rather than comforting me, and I blinked over and over, willing myself not to cry. It was not fair that she was beaten and I was spared, that she was punished for Father's insanity while I was forced to hide in my room. Her bruises should be mine. My arm began to ache, growing from a slight sting to a bone-deep throb. Chris's bruises faded away, and I gasped, shoving up my sleeve to stare wide-eyed at the finger marks that now encircled my forearm. What is it? She asked, and I hurriedly yanked my sleeve back down before she could see what I had done. Nothing, I lied. She sighed and smiled, her eyes remaining closed. You're getting good at that, Lanya. My arm scarcely hurts anymore. I kept silent. Krissa had named herself our protector, and she was determined to save us to the point of foolishness. If she learned that I could take her pain and make it my own, she would no longer allow me to take care of her, out of sheer, stubborn pride. But I was just as stubborn as she, and so after that night I began to steal her bruises, and Brannon's. Not all of them, or they might have grown suspicious, but enough to reduce their suffering, to allow them to sleep comfortably and wake without stiffness. They thought it was my poultices, that I was gaining more knowledge of herbs and medicines. I let them believe it, even going so far as to start a herb garden in front of the house, where I gathered the ingredients I claimed I needed to treat their injuries. It was nonsense, of course. As I learned more of my gift, both its limits and its strengths, I found that I had power over their emotions as well. I could drain my siblings' unhappiness at a touch, chasing the shadows from their eyes, or push my contentment into them, easing their worries so they could rest. I gave them my exhaustion until they collapsed into sleep, though it left me wide-eyed and jittery for hours after. I drained their pain, though the weight of it transferred to me, heavy and agonizing. I could not take cuts or broken bones, nor could I heal our father's broken mind, though I tried once as he slept, and spent several hours vomiting over a bucket for my efforts. But I grew stronger, and as the years dragged on, I kept my family from giving in to despair. I earned my secret. But it was a burden, and hard to keep when we lived in such close quarters. More than once I was nearly found out, flinching as one of the others brushed against my ill-gotten bruises, and then having to allay their concern with careful falsehoods. I took to avoiding contact, never quite allowing the others to touch me, lest they discover the marks I hid beneath my clothes. I bathed while they slept, and slept in my clothes. Thankfully, the others mistook it for a manifestation of the fear that walked among us like a living thing, and never pushed me for the truth. A year passed, and another. I turned 13, and Chrissa showed me how to hide the changes of womanhood, though I do not believe our father would have noticed. I took over my sister's duties at home, so that she could earn more coin in the village. Though we never spoke of it, I was more talented at these domestic chores, especially cooking, and she was grateful to relinquish them. Destiny works mysteriously. If Chrissa had not been working in the village to pay off the debts that hung over us like a headsman's axe, we may never have learned how strong the connection among us truly was. 12 Kuna, 574 AF. Elixon had revealed a surprising talent for fixing broken things, in between the stories he told, and soon had taken over all repairs around our neglected farm. While Brannon and Reese tended to the fields, and Kylie saw to our dwindling number of animals, Elixon busied himself with mending everything, from the worn-out farm equipment to the failing water pump. We grew accustomed to the sounds of both hammering and his clever curses, so that it was nearly a melody we had all learned to ignore. I was washing laundry the day he decided at last to tackle the leak in our roof, scrambling atop the ancient cedar shingles like a sure-footed mountain goat. I hummed quietly to myself as I draped heavy sheets across the line. I did not notice when the hammering stopped, barely heard my brother's faint cry as he slipped on the slick eaves. But I knew he had fallen when the pain slammed into me and stole my breath. Elixon. The clothespins dropped unnoticed from my hands as I ran to the side of the house where he had fallen, my heart thundering in my chest. He was struggling to sit up, his face white as death with shock, his left arm dangling, bent unnaturally. I dropped to my knees beside him, my heart caught in my throat. I do not know what possessed me to call for Chrissa, save that she was our beacon, our safeguard against fear. I reached out to her, and found her, irritated for some reason, her thoughts filled with lemon wax and beautiful sky-blue eyes. Elixon's hurt. My panic burst out of me like a flood, and I was helpless to stop it. I don't know what to do. The sky-blue eyes were replaced in an instant with a bone-shattering calm, and I heard her, somehow, like an indigo wave within my mind. I'm coming. Brannon appeared beside me, his face set in determined lines. Without speaking, he gently lifted our brother, careful of his broken arm, and carried him inside the house. I followed, wringing my hands. It was not until Kylie and Reese met me at the door, the blind terror in their eyes cutting through my own, that I was at last able to think again. Our father had hidden a heavy bottle of whiskey beneath his bed a year before, and promptly forgotten about it. I asked Kylie to fetch it, and sent Reese to the woods to find 2 of the straightest sticks he could for setting the arm. The bottle was dusty, and I hurriedly cleaned it with my skirt before pouring a healthy swig down Elixon's throat. I held him down as Brannon set the arm, pulling sharply on the brake until the bone was straight. Though I tried to take as much of his pain as I could, he still screamed and fainted. I wiped cold sweat from my forehead, grateful for a respite from his agony. Reese returned with the sticks at last, and I tied them to my brother's broken arm with strips of rags. I left Kylie to watch worriedly over her twin as I staggered outside with Brannon, Reese trailing silently behind us as I sat heavily upon the steps that led to our door. I found I was still clutching a whiskey bottle, and took a large gulp, gasping as the fire of it burned away the ice in my veins. The warm breeze dried my fierce sweat, and slowly the nerves and anxiety inside me eased. I offered the bottle to Brannon, and he sipped from it, making a face as he handed it back. Chrissa arrived at a gallop, throwing herself from the wild-eyed Rennick before he had even stopped. I tried to reassure her, but Brannon shook his head at me as she brushed past, hurrying inside to check on Elixir. Rhys sighed and went to care for Rennick, who stood where she had left him, sweating and breathing like a bellows. She emerged again after several minutes and sat beside me on the steps. I handed her the whiskey wordlessly, and she took a long pull from it before returning it to me. We stared off across the fields for long minutes, unsure of what to say to each other. Brannon finally stood, restless, and broke the silence. "You heard her." The words were meant for Crissa, and she nodded. For a moment, I could sense the worry and confusion swirling within her, and took another gulp of the whiskey. "We all heard her." He leaned against a post holding up our roof, his gaze flickering between me and my sister. I gasped. I had not realized the others had heard me when I had reached for her. "What does it mean?" I thought of the ease with which I'd touched my sister's mind, reading her thoughts of sky-colored eyes. If she reached for me, what would she find? Would she be able to see my secret? "We can't let our minds spill into each other's carelessly," Crissa said slowly, voicing my concern. A shadow passed behind her brilliant green eyes, and I realized with astonishment that my sister had her own secrets that she did not wish to share. I had been fortunate she had not been thinking of them when I had so recklessly entered her mind. "Shields," I blurted, and blushed when they both looked at me, the whiskey merrily dancing through my blood. "We need to learn to block each other out." They nodded, and so it was agreed. We practiced each night before bed, talking to each other only in our minds, learning how to focus our thoughts so that we shared only what we wanted with each other, keeping our secrets to ourselves. We quickly became proficient, able to find each other and talk to just one, despite the distance between us. We learned to create shields, blocking each other out, and found that our gift was useless when we were asleep, like a blank wall that we could not penetrate. I think that was a blessing. Surely I had no wish to inflict my nightmares upon the others. It is hard to explain to others this method of communicating between us. It is not so much a voice, but a color and a presence, accompanied by a series of emotions and images. Mine, the others told me, was like a golden light in their minds, and they found me serene and calming. Kylie was vibrant green and wild, Elixir silver and unyielding. Brannon was brilliant red and burning, his thoughts often accompanied by the fury he tried so hard to keep buried. Rhys, oddly, was white, nearly blinding, his presence like an ache that pressed against the back of my eyes. In time, he learned to control it better, so that it did not cause the rest of us so much pain. Crissa was the hardest to describe, and I looked at her helplessly when she asked me of it, unsure what to say. Brannon saved me, staring at her with dark eyes as he answered. "You're blue, Crissa, deep as the sea, and filled with all the rage and calm of it." A strange comparison, surely, for children that had never seen the ocean.